No, Manhattan, 59th Street Bridge.
Brooklyn Bridge is the same way.
Or maybe there ought to be some kind of.
So, good morning. Do we have a motion for the adoption of the November 21st, 2019 Borough Board minutes? Second, all in favor? Motion passes. Do we have a motion for the adoption of the October 17th, 2019? Hold it. Did I say agenda before?
Yes.
So now this one is, yes, this one's minutes. Motion? Second?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Nicole.
Nicole, are you ready to make a presentation, or should we move on to some other reports? Well, we have quorum, so what's best for your schedule, it's up to you. Sure, okay, so come, sit, stand, or,
Yeah, I'll sit, because I don't want to block the screen. So, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Nicole Yearwood. I'm a Senior Partnership Specialist with the U.S. Census Bureau. It's been a few months since we kind of stopped by and checked in. And so I'm here this morning just to provide a few updates on what's been going on since we kind of last made a presentation. As you know, March 12th, a lot of people look at April 1st as Census Day, but you know, we personally are looking at March 12th when letters start to arrive at homes. It's kind of like the first time, you know, people will begin to be able to respond to the census. They'll begin receiving information starting that week between March 12th and March 20th. How many of you are subscribed to receive our updates? Okay, so those of you who are subscribed to receive the updates know one of the most recent pieces of information that was shared earlier this week regarding the map by census tract of who will receive the letter with information on how to go online and call on the phone, in addition to the traditional form, which I believe is called our type of enumeration map. And so now you can visit this map online and see what your actual census tract will be receiving in the mail. They did tell us initially that some homes would receive the letter of invitation with information on how to go online and call on the phone in addition to the form. And so now that's officially rolled out. In addition to that, you can also see if someone will receive an English and Spanish version of the form as well. So it's going to tell you what your census tract will receive in the mailbox. And that if you're not subscribed to receive our emails, I suggest you do. A lot of times all these updates roll out, and I'll tell you on occasion I've received a few updates externally before I receive them internally. So I would definitely strongly suggest, you know, making sure you get those emails, especially as we get closer to 2020. So that's one of the kind of hot off the presses updates. In addition, we've rolled out our Statistics in Schools program at census.gov/schools, where we have tools for educators from pre-K all the way through high school to use how to use our statistics to teach subjects like math, social studies, science, etc. And that's a great resource for educators. It'll be a great resource for schools. And we're going to begin our school outreach probably starting in the next week or so. We also are still focused on recruiting. We need to recruit 180,000 people in the state of New York. We are working hard on that. Our recruiters are working hard on that. As partnership specialists, we are working hard on it. Right now, everyone is a recruiter. We need to make sure that we probably, I think New York City, probably about 80,000 people are going to be recruited. We also want to remind everyone, we know that in some places people are already saying that, you know, they applied in April, they haven't heard yet. An email went out the first week in November. outlining the timeline for contacting people, particularly who are interested in being census takers. So we do have other roles that are available, but the bulk of the hiring will be the census taker positions, and that won't take place until starting January. They'll begin calling people if they're selected. Then they'll go through the background check process. Once they clear the background check process, they'll be in the pool for training and basically all set to go from May of 2020. But that is how the process will roll out. I think that is all last but certainly not least, we've had an informational copy of the questionnaire posted on our website since, I would say, August of this year. But we also just rolled out the Spanish translation of that, of the census, of the actual census questionnaire. And it looks like the traditional form. It doesn't look like the online interface. We don't know what that's going to look like yet. But the form itself, which we're used to receiving in the mail, is available, an informational copy. So everyone will know what that looks like, and you can find that on census.gov and 2020census.gov. We've also rolled out our language glossary tools. So as some of you probably know, we're only covering 59 languages. When you go online and call on the phone, you'll be able to do that in English and 12 other languages that the Office of Management and Budget deemed the most spoken languages in the country. I think they said 99% of the population speak English and these 12 languages that we're covering. But of course, we know we're in New York City. We are uniquely diverse. We have the Borough of Queens, where they speak almost 200 languages, and I'm sure we speak more than the languages we're covering in Manhattan as well. So we want to make sure, one, that we have some tools for that. We're hiring locally, we're hiring people who speak these languages, but also making sure that we have some equipment to help those who are working in the field who may not translate. And so those materials, video guides, were just added to our website as well. So I encourage all of you that, again, if you don't already subscribe to our newsletter, please do. It's a wonderful resource. It's really helpful, and you will get the information literally hot off the presses. Does anyone have any questions?
In terms of recruiting, can you give a little snapshot of, I think I heard the word eligibility or qualification. So other than communication skills, what kind of qualifications does a potential census worker need? Do they have to be a citizen, for example? Is there a drug test? Is there a background check having to do with prior criminal history and things like that?
So the qualifications for employment are that you need to be 18 years of age or older, have a valid social security number, a valid email address. Men born after 1959 must be registered with Selective Service or have a waiver. And there is a citizenship requirement, but that is currently being waived. And how the citizenship requirement, well, the waiver works is that if someone speaks a language that we cannot find a citizen to cover, then non-citizens will be allowed to work. So what we're telling people is that they should apply if they're not a citizen, but they're a green card holder and allowed to work in the country, so they have a social security number. They may be deemed ineligible initially, but when we need that language proficiency that's not represented in a particular area by someone who is a citizen, their application will be activated, they will be then deemed eligible, and they will be called to work if we need that specific language proficiency. What will happen is they'll go to our portal, 2020census.gov/jobs. They answer 30 questions. It's really more like a personality test. If they're interested in a supervisory position, they'll answer 9 more questions, and that's it. So there's no resume, no cover letter required. If they are selected, they will go through a background check, a general federal background check, which will look for a record, etc. But we encourage all to apply. We tell people, I don't know what will disqualify someone, to be honest. So we tell everyone to apply. If something comes up in their background that has us raise the question, then we will allow people, I think, 60 to 30 days to explain, what it is that came up. If they have a valid explanation, then they go from there. But those are the requirements right now.
Just, it would be because our community in Community Board 11 East Harlem, we have a large population of immigrants, to make sure that the messaging, because, and I know you've been very good with that, but to make sure that anyone else going out into the field is saying that you have to be counted regardless, and make sure that it's, because some people in our community do have a fear that they have a misunderstanding that it could be associated with, and that information could be communicated to ICE, for example.
Yes.
I've had to sit with several people in our community and telling them, look, you, don't worry, it's not connected. You just have to be counted, it gives us resources, and then we can help everyone.
Yes.
So just as long as that's more of a comment, just to make sure that messaging continues.
No, and thank you for that. And we're hoping that all community boards are helping us reach everyone just the same. I tell people all the time, this is the largest civilian operation that the country undertakes. Like, we literally have to count everyone. And so we do need some partners who can also share that message. I definitely make sure I emphasize the fact that under United States Code Title 13, that the Census Bureau is not allowed to share information with any other city, state, federal agency or authority. We let them, I even jokingly say, listen, you know, sometimes for certain benefits, you can't have an extra person in the house, but you might have a cousin sleeping on the couch who ran into hard times. We need to count them on the census and know that we're not gonna call your landlord. We cannot use anything that you share with us against you. And then, of course, furthermore, as Census Bureau employees, we are sworn to keep information, personal identifying information that we collect private and confidential for the rest of our lives, or face 5 years imprisonment and or a $250,000 fine. So, you know, we try to play that. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
In terms of the online interface, could you tell us more about the security and safeguards that that's going to have, given the fact that we've had issues in our nation related to online elections and whatnot? So what are you doing about that, and when will that be done? And finally, what is the proposed date when the census have all been captured to release that information, publish that?
Yes.
So those are 2 questions.
So the first question regarding cybersecurity, we're working on that daily. So the decennial census is actually not the only survey that the Census Bureau does. We do, I think, about 130 other surveys, and so we're regularly working on cybersecurity. Someone is working on cybersecurity as I'm speaking. We work on that. Specifically for the 2020 census, the online interface, what is going to happen, and again, I'm no techie, so I mean, I do hope that anyone who works in tech will understand exactly what I'm saying, and it'll make complete sense to you. But my understanding is that when you hit submit, to put, first of all, you know how some applications online, if you stop, you can save the data, you can go back later. That will not be allowed with the census. So you have to be prepared to fill it out. When you go there, you won't be able to save it and come back. So that's one of the safeguards for information, is that it won't, you know, you won't walk away from the computer, come back, it's there. No, it will disappear and you will have to start over again. So that's 1. 2, once you submit the form, the data will be scrambled and placed behind a firewall. It will be scrambled a second time, placed behind a second firewall, and scrambled a third time, placed behind a third firewall before it reaches our servers. And I know you asked the second, what was your second part?
The final effort, all the,
Oh, yes. So our deadline to submit the statistics for all the states is December 31st of 2020. The data is then released to the public between, I think it's April 1st of 2021 or March 31st of 2021.
keep our fingers crossed.
Yes.
So we all know that the success of this depends on the applicants and hiring. So my question is, if we're looking for roughly 80,000 in New York City alone, there's always an attrition rate for qualifications and things. Can you comment at all on the amount of applications that you've had? I mean, is this something that we should be, as community boards, reminding people we need more people?
Yes, and definitely Community Board 1 actually is an area where we need some more applicants. We can use them there. We are on par, but we're not done. So, and because of those attrition rates that you just mentioned, you know, the Bureau is very concerned with the employment rate being high now, and versus 2010, when we were hitting the recession, we were receiving there was an overabundance of applicants because a lot of people were looking for work. And they were highly skilled because they were coming from other industries, perhaps they were just laid off. We don't have the same economy that we did then. So we want to make sure that we actually over-recruit to make sure that we do have enough qualified candidates, that people who are willing to do these jobs, because it could be, you know, maybe walking, you know, they may not be selected as a recruiting assistant or something else, and so they may not be up for the challenge, because it's quite demanding. So that's why we are recruiting up to about 80,000.
If you
to
have
be
anything,
safe.
you can email us specific.
Absolutely,
Then
yes.
I'd be happy to talk to Anthony and the office and see what we can get shared out.
Yes, and I did call Lucian actually and asked him I sent him a blurb to share with the district, you know, and just let people know. I tell people, listen, it's $25 an hour to be a census taker. It's $27.50 to be a supervisor. You may or may not need that money, but we definitely need people to help us reach hard to count communities. And across the city, we have them in every community board. There's at least one hard to count census tract. No one is exempt. And so we want to make sure that we have someone who is familiar with the community doing this work in the community. We don't want to have somebody from the Bronx come into Manhattan because we couldn't recruit enough Manhattanites to do the work. We want people familiar with the neighborhoods.
Our
That's
full
very
board is
important.
tonight, so I'll make sure we say something there.
Thank you, thank you.
Can you tell us, like, what is your target of people that you're trying to recruit, either by community board or by communities?
We
Or
don't
how about in
have it-
Manhattan? How many people are you looking to recruit in Manhattan, more or less?
I think it might be like maybe 10, 15,000, maybe 10 to 15,000, yeah.
And then
And I would go with 15 because we want to do,
Yeah,
let's go
the higher
high.
number.
Yes, let's go high. Yeah, and like I said, we're not there. And just so you know, also recruiting will probably wrap up around the end of February. So that's another reminder. We also have 2 recruiting days coming up. We're actually in the middle of one. I don't know if everybody knows that we had a recruiting week in October, between the 20th and the 26th. We're gonna do another set of recruiting days, so if anyone is interested in that, they can let me know. I think it's December 12th to the 15th, and then January 23rd through the 26th. So if anyone has computers, laptops, tablets, you know, and could say, listen, we can offer a space from, you know, 10 to 2 or 11 to 3 or something like that during the day or the evening, we can definitely have our recruiters contact you and set up a recruiting day.
And does
We
that-
just need the space and devices, and then and some advertising, of course, and then we kind of do the
Is
rest.
there a minimum age, like, do you have to?
So it's 18.
It's 18.
Also 17-year-olds, if they're turning 18, let's say by March 1st. Because the application will adjust their age when it comes. So if they're 17 now, but they'll be 18 by March 1st, the age will change and they can work.
And here's a strange question, what about the senior community? I mean, there's no, there's no age up
Oh,
limit.
no. If they're willing to work, yes, we bring them on
Work
board,
them on.
yes. Yes, absolutely. No age limit, there's no top.
Could you give us a major alert if you find any community in our district, after you've done your major recruiting and you're making appointments, that you find 0 in any area?
Oh, yes, we will.
That we would call either the community boards so that at least we can make sure that someone is there, even if it's gonna be one of us. So I think that that's just a safeguard that we'd like to have.
No, absolutely, we can do that, and that's actually the benefit of being active in the complete count committees, because we're gonna be doing that with recruiting as well as with the census. As some of you, as many of you should know, this is the first time we'll be able to see how people are responding in real time. And so wherever we have shortfalls, whether it's in recruiting or in the response rates, we will be coming to the complete count committees in those communities to ask them to help us get out the count, assist with recruiting. We will definitely be reaching out to the borough president if we have concerns in Manhattan to seek her support and help as well. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a comment, and Jolie
Yes,
Golden
yes.
is from my board and community. I think she's been invited, but just to make sure that you're aware, there's a senior fair on December the 11th, which is right up against your
Yes.
recruiting day deadline, at a site in Manhattan Valley, which is part of my community and probably a part of my community that might be seen as undercounted in the last census. So we just want to put that on the radar screen so that we'll make sure that there's a space for you there.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you,
And
thank
do
you.
come back.
Yes, yes, we will be back. I think we'll be back next month, Brian?
Nicole, just for these upcoming recruiting days,
Mm-hmm.
we should be in touch with you, or if anyone contacts our office, should be in touch with you.
Yes, and
Okay,
then
great.
I'll get it to the appropriate parties. Thank you so much,
Excellent.
thank you.
Thank you
for
coming.
Of course, you're welcome.
Okay. We'll be moving to the Borough President's report. Wanted to say that our online application is live, and people have been reapplying, and we're gonna have a conversation in our unit to try to make this a little interesting, to see if who's the first community board to get all the reapplications in. We may have some kind of outing or something to, thank that board for being the first one in. In keeping with that, the paper challenge. Last quarter, CB1 won the paper challenge, followed by CB5 as the second place winners, and CB4. So we are now in the next quarter challenge, and we had a nice reception here with a hot breakfast that 2 weeks ago. I can't say what's gonna happen in the next quarter, whether there will be another hot breakfast, but we'll push for that. This past Monday, the borough president held a public hearing on Lenox Terrace, getting ready for the borough president's comments. This has been a big issue. CB10 held 2 public hearings prior to coming with their recommendations. They had voted no with conditions, and we can hopefully hear more about that in the report. Next Monday, the 25th, here, we will be having the public hearing on the Religious Facilities Task Force. So everyone is welcome. And that is it for the Borough President report. We'll be reaching out, the liaisons and myself, to the chairs and the DMs, just to help and get out the word on the, reapplication being available and getting people to apply. Yes.
Paper copies.
Paper copies will be coming soon. That's getting tweaked a little bit, and then we usually send it to the printers, but we ended up tossing a whole bunch of papers last year, so we're gonna print them as needed. So you could let us know how many paper copies you have, and then we'll make sure that the liaison for the board will bring them to whatever meeting is coming up and bring them to the office.
The other thing we've done is put on our website the paper copy PDF so they can print it themselves, so you don't have to do that. So
Cool.
if we know where it is, then we can save you some trees and
As
whatnot.
soon, because we make changes to the application, we're making sure that the paper application has incorporated some of those changes. You will notice there's more check-offs in terms of housing options and some other demographics. So we should have that, today is Thursday, by the end of the week, and so we could get it to you tomorrow or Monday.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Oh, one more thing. I have decided, and the chief of staff thought it was a great idea. So, every borough board, we either start with Community Board 1 to give the chair reports, or Community Board 12. I've decided that starting in January, the first board to report will be the Board of the Month. So CB6 will report in June, will be the first board to report in June, and then we'll follow up from there so that everybody gets a chance to report first. Okay?
Community Board 8 doesn't get a chance because they don't meet in August?
We, Borough Board meet, because what?
We don't meet in August.
Borough Board meets
Borough
all,
Board meets all year.
yes, Borough Board meets all year. Okay.
We're still last.
Negotiate, because I'm January.
In
Well,
December, in December.
this coming December would be nice, but,
Uh-huh. Well, today you're starting first, Richard.
Okay.
And so I will move forward to, I'll give an opportunity for some council members to show up, and then we'll move to staff, but we'll move forward to the community board chair reports for now. So, CB 12, Richard Lewis.
oh, okay. We finished our budget rankings and turned them into planning on their new website, so that's integrated with the Statement of District Needs. And we did it on time. Apparently, they said that 46% of community boards got their stuff on time, so they're working vigorously to finish the project, at the new way of doing it at planning. We had a visit with, for 2 hours with the New York State Liquor Authority, with Michael Jones, who is their deputy chief. We had an extensive discussion on what we do and what they do. And so we will be refining our process a little, understanding how they do renewals and new applications. I would advise all community boards to have such a visit to understand the perception that there is a complete difference between the state's perception of what they can do and what we can do as community boards. There are things that they are particularly interested in, and things that we may be interested, and they may not be the same. So if you get a lot of applications that you object to and they approve, it's because they're looking for certain things. They have a 30-day window for applying, whether you get it in on time or not. So they are a different agency, and there is no direct mix between both of the community boards and them. So it behooves you to know exactly what they're doing and to visit with them. So essentially, that is my report. And if there are any questions, I'll answer.
CB 11.
Yes, good morning. I'm Xavier Santiago, Vice Chair of Community Board 11, not Nilsa today. So she sends her regards. We have had a very full plate. Kind of start from the beginning. We had our full board meeting this past Tuesday, where we passed a resolution condemning the NYPD transit and the arrest of the candy seller, the young man, and the way that was handled. We've also asked in the resolution for Cuomo to stop hiring the additional officers for the MTA and to actually appropriate those funds toward our Statement of District Needs and Budget. So we've tethered that request because there has been multiple requests that have been unmet, and this is something that we need as a quality of life, given that most of the requests when we have for officers are for doing verticals in our NYCHA developments and things of that nature. But again, we just passed that on Tuesday. I also attended the 23rd Precinct Council meeting and discovered that because of what Cuomo is doing upstate in Albany, they have lost several officers that were very good on the beat, officers that were beloved by the community. And this is something that we're now seeing as a knock-on effect. So just calling everyone's attention to it, because again, part of what makes New York great is some of these intricacies of being able to get a candy bar or whatever, or a churro. On the other side, we do understand why there are certain issues being raised, but still, again, it's the way it's being handled. We are also having a youth symposium next year, probably about Q2. We're bringing a broad coalition under the CB11 tent, and get the word out is to help our NYCHA youth from several different means, from intervention to engagement to working with them to really hear what they need. It will be youth-led, but we'll be spearheading that, and stay tuned, and if you can spread the word, especially 9, 10, 11, 12, like just bring everyone in. We really want to have a full house for that. Also, this coming up November 30th, we have in our co-sponsoring with Harlem Yes is Women of Color in the State of AIDS Today. As everyone knows, that December 1st is World AIDS Day, and we wanted to address especially women of color, whether trans or normal, however you have it, and we wanted to be very focused on that because and it's personal for me because I lost my uncle to AIDS on December 2nd, back in 1996. So we're going to be hosting that at the Museum of the City of New York. We'll have a flyer. Please, if you can, send people out. We're looking forward to a great event there. And and the last little bit, we had our elections this past Tuesday, and the board saw fit to re-elect Nelson and myself. So you have us for another 25 months. So,
Oh, it's 2 years?
yeah, it's a 2 year.
Good for you, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, and could you send specifics about those events so that we could publicize?
Oh, absolutely. I would love to do that. Yeah, absolutely. So, and you can get in touch with me. My email is very simple, vicechair@cb11m.org. That's it. So, any questions, let me know.
Great.
Thanks.
CB10, Cecily.
Good morning, I'm Cecily Harris. So we've had a busy month. We did Harlem Holiday Lights with CB9 and 125th Street Bid and CB11 last night. It's a really great success. Barbara Askins and 125th Street Bid have really been a great supporter of us. So, and they included us in their last bid meeting. So we were able to talk about street life concerns, everyday life concerns in our area. The panel was Gail Brewer and me and Nilsa. Someone from CB9, Ken Miles, spoke briefly. Brian Benjamin and the precinct. So we were able to talk about the issues that we are facing there. So that's been our partnership with the 120th Street Bid. We did the HDFC Awards with CB9 and CB11. Hopefully CB12 will join us next time, and the downtown boards can get in on it as well. But we had a really great time, and we were able to support the folks that are keeping HDFCs alive and talking about that legislation, the new legislation that's coming down for HDFCs. So that was a great opportunity for us. And lastly, just like Rosie said, we had the Lennox Terrace rezoning. So we did our part in that. We had 2 hearings. So that was a lot going on for us. But we ended up with a no with conditions. So that was a very difficult decision for us. I would just say it was never going to be yes. We were talking, it was either just going to be straight up no or no with conditions. And how we landed at the no with conditions was just because we wanted to remain at the table. So with a straight no, and then, marching off like a petulant child is probably not what we wanted to happen. But we wanted it to be noted that this was kind of like our dream list of conditions. Mm-hmm. So these things are probably not going to happen. They're not going to go for these things, but we wanted it to be noted, and we wanted it to be recorded what we heard from the community. So we worked very closely with the Tenant Association and just with everyday folks that live around there. So some of our conditions were just really quickly. So they're proposing the C6 zoning. So we were like, no. So that's just a no. But we were looking at maybe a C1, which they're probably like no. But the reasons, I guess you all probably know the reasons why. But also tenant protections that were not available to them. Part of this community benefits agreement was that they would fix the sinks and the hot water and the mold, which should already be done without a tenant benefits agreement. So that should not be part of you getting our yes, is that you fix up the apartments that are already in disrepair. So you need to be doing that as a good faith effort, not waiting till this comes down. So we also talked about MIH and that it's going to be 1,600 units that we're proposing, and only 400 will be affordable. So that is not enough for our area. So we definitely know on that. And we wanted to also talk about some of the other issues. It will change the makeup of Harlem, basically. And we wanted to talk about the African American polarity that we will be facing. We have enjoyed great leadership from a lot of African American leaders, and we don't want to put that at risk. So we talked about the Voting Rights Act in our resolution, and how we have to be cognizant of making sure that even the folks that face displacement are going to be heard when it comes time to go to the polls. So we want to make sure that we're able to maintain our history and make sure that our folks are being represented by people who live up there and know what they're going through and their struggle. So that's one of the things we included. Historic preservation, because we've had so many folks of note live in Lenox Terrace. It was the grand place to live, and we wanted to remain that way. They proposed a walk of fame in Lenox Terrace. That was what the ODIC folks proposed. We were like, that's kind of like pandering to us at this point. We need more than a walk of fame. So that's not something that we wanted. So we wanted to see more from them in that. They're proposing the parking underground, which we all know that the rats will definitely be taken over at that point. So what are they doing to address that? What are they doing to address the asthma issues that are happening up there? So we had a lot of things. It's 10 pages. It's our first time doing a 10-pager. I know y'all are probably used to that, but it's the first time for CB10 that we did a 10-page resolution. And I just want to thank the borough president for helping us with that and making sure that we were well trained so we can give a well thought out resolution. So we also had 3 board trainings on land use just to prepare for this and other things. But just so everybody's on the same page and informed by what the ULURP process is and what we can and cannot do. So we did 3 trainings as part of that too.
Okay.
So.
Great.
Can I ask a question? Do you know what AMI is that they're using for
Yeah,
the rate
thank
for
you.
the affordable?
So they haven't really said anything, which is the thing that we're like ding, ding, ding,
Yeah,
ding.
because
Right, right.
they're going to use Putnam and Rockland like they do with us.
Yes.
So you need to make sure that.
Yeah.
I don't think you can, I don't think you can change the composition, but what you can change is the percentage of AMI that the housing would be eligible for, or,
Right.
I'm saying it that, you get the idea.
Change the bandwidth.
Right,
Thank
so
you.
we're asking
Much better way to say it.
50-30-20.
That's
You're
the
asking
buzzword.
50-30-20. That's what we're asking.
Okay.
Very good.
So you're saying if all those conditions were met, then you would approve some kind of housing, additional housing?
So that's the interesting thing that we had with the borough president. Like, what does that mean? Because when they talked to us about what our vote needs to look like, it was like, no with conditions, yes with conditions. Those were the 4 boxes that we had to fit this into. So with the no with conditions, it's kind of like, we want to still be able to say no in the end too. Even if you meet all these, we're probably not gonna do it. But so that's an interesting question, and we always debate that. What does that mean? I'm thinking that if they do meet these things, there's always the next ask as well. So these are our baseline things. So these are our conversation starters. These are our things, because once this happens, this is going to change the whole layout of Harlem. So this conversation needs to be continuous. So I don't think that just because they meet these things that we put in this document, that we will go ahead and say yes. But we are open to that conversation of being part of this change.
So I guess one of my questions after, with land use stuff in Lower Manhattan specifically, is what on your list are you not willing to walk away from as the most important things to consider? And the reason, I know the whole list is important, but I can't think of any point that we've gotten everything that we asked for, even if it was reasonable. And there's always a swath of gray through all of it. So if you're asking for example, 20,000 square feet of community space, is the offer that comes back to you, well, we'll be happy to do that in retail. Does retail count as community space for you. For us, it didn't, and it's part of a larger conversation, but, you know, or if you didn't spec, you know, they say, yes, we're gonna give you grand community space included with this building, and that could be 1,000 square feet. That's a little less than grand, in terms of adjectives, but there are things that I would say internally that they would be really good conversations for you to be on top of earlier versus when they come back to you. And they will come back.
And the way we do it, I mean, it's site-specific.
Yeah.
And it's a negotiation. Our STIPs, our conditions is for negotiation.
Right.
But we know we're in there for negotiation, for this site. When I'm hearing on your conditions, there are things in there that are not necessarily specific to that site. You're using this to jump off to community-wide issues. And that's hard to negotiate with a particular developer.
So I'm not gonna deny that's kind of what we were,
I'm
that's
just telling
what
what I'm
we are,
hearing.
and you're right. Because I don't think, and you know, I'm a rather new chair, so we've never really looked at Harlem as a whole. So this gave us pause, and it scared us really. So then I think this is kind of like that reaction that we're having. So, but in many ways you have to look at it as a whole situation, because once this C6, if it comes in there, then that whole 135th Street corridor is going to change. And then that means that it's going to flow uptown, further up to you. And that's what we're afraid of, and that's what we're trying to control. So we are involving a lot of different CBOs and a lot of organizations to get on top of this right now, because this is just the beginning of something that is going to be this huge mountain that we have to climb. So I think you are right. We definitely are using this as a schematic for what we would like to see going forward for everybody. So when you come to us, you already know what we're looking for.
If I
Sounds
may,
like you need to hire a planner,
Yeah.
We are.
a special project there.
We are
Because
actually.
one of the things to tag on to what you said is the questions that you need to ask now, or what questions didn't you ask? Where, that's the most important thing, you know, is to have a planner take a look at the whole thing and say, well, what questions didn't we ask? And how is it specific to this site? Because there's always something in a text change, a zoning change, that we as a community might not have thought of, you know, is it, you know, about a POPS, a publicly owned private space? Is it about, you know, there's so many questions that a planner could really be helpful.
and if I may, one of the things that we did in the 2010 ULURP and which was a rezoning for buildings that are now, that were once euphemistically referred to as the Trump buildings, but those buildings, I'm proud to say, are taking the name off their buildings, was to have a section of our ULURP resolution that essentially was core principles. And I think it's actually very good that you're doing that work, because the next developer that comes along, you'll have a slightly different list, but nobody's going to walk into your board and wonder where they start from. And if you are treating everybody who's a comer kind of the same way or from the same starting point, then there's a fairness involved that can answer a lot of, because lots of times developers come with a very sad story about how much work they have to do and what it costs to run electrical into a site and blah, blah, blah. And your response is that we have a consistent set of needs that we're trying to address, and if you want to be part of our community, here's how you do it. I think that's great.
So I just want to opine, and thank you for bringing that, because as you know, we went through our own rezoning and fought tooth and nail for a lot of conditions. Our land use consultant is George James. He's fantastic. He does a lot of great work. And I will say that he is probably, and I like to use, because I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, he's probably one of the best people to draw it out in crayon and literally simplify it and give you 2 cases. You know, we, with MIH and triggering that, it's kind of tethering it to your core positions on everything. But right now we're dealing with something, and I didn't have much of an update, but with Children's Aid Society on 101st in Lexington, with that site, that's an R72, I believe, if memory serves me, and that's as of right. And if the developer is looking to use church and Children's Aid and possibly work with Mount Sinai, that becomes commercial and community space, and therefore they could break the plane of the sky as of right. And he's looking to merge those lots together, so that's something to be aware of, whereas as a residential, it'd probably be capped at about 12 to 14. So these sort of little things and nuances and looking, that I would recommend, getting into a little bit into the weeds with your land use consultant or whoever's going to advise you, because that can help you navigate the path, especially when you're trying to get affordability in. And as you know, as like in CB11, we're in the same position where we are way below the AMI, mainly because of Westchester County jacking us up. But in any event, every time we have a development come online, if it triggers a mandatory inclusionary housing, we stay right on top of it. So, reach out to me and I can get you connected to George. But yeah, thank you. Sorry to take up so much time.
Well, no, we had mentioned some time back about keeping time limits, but we never really get a chance to have this interchange, and there's so much experience in the room that I thought this was very important, so.
Could I just add a quick thing, which is talk to all of your elected officials, state and city, everyone, and try and get them to be fully and verbally supportive of what you're trying to do.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, everyone.
Oh, Rosie, really quick. And I'm sorry, guys, I might have to leave. I have a DCAS training upstairs, so that's where that needs to be actually right now.
Okay, CB9.
We also have our general board tonight, where we will be hearing from a developer and institution, Columbia, for their plans for the 125th Street site on Broadway that formerly had a McDonald's. They are proposing to build a 410-foot tall tower for student housing there, which is about 38 stories, depending on how high you make the floors. And it is currently as of right, although we are double checking that, but what is particularly galling to many community board members is that this site was originally supposed to be the site of a new public school facility under the general project plan and community benefits agreement that the board negotiated with Columbia as part of the rezoning and eminent domain they used to create their new campus. So we are pushing back on that rather hard. The Department of Education, under Mayor Bloomberg, decided to return the site to Columbia and say that they didn't need any land for a school, thank you. But so it is still in their obligations under the GPP to construct a school. That has not been done in the past 12 years since the plan and eminent domain was approved, so we are going to be entering into probably a contentious meeting and contentious negotiations around that and around other things the community would like to see, such as accessibility improvements at the 125th Street station on the 1 train, which is right there and is also in this stretch of stations north of 96th Street and south of 64th Street, where there is no handicapped accessible stations. So there are none in CB9 on the 1 train, which is ridiculous. So that is coming up tonight. There's been plenty of legwork to be done leading up to that. We also did have a very successful night last night with CB 10 and 11 with the 125th Street bid holiday lights. Really, there was a good turnout. CB9 hosts a children's pavilion with a lot of activities and giveaways for children in the community. And we also jointly helped with CB11 and CB10 with the HDFC awards. But that whole area along 125th Street from kind of Compton Avenue, Morningside Avenue through 12th Avenue has become a really hot area just because there are lots of different things. The Janus Properties Manhattanville Factory District is coming online, which will be a really relatively large influx of new commercial office space into the community that the community board actually fought for and fought very hard to make that development possible. We wanted an employment center in the district that was not Columbia University. And so as that's coming on, making sure that that is successfully integrated into the surrounding neighborhood and into the 125th Street corridor is a priority for us. Dealing with the continued frictions and frustrations of the Columbia Manhattanville campus, block or so over on 125th Street, is another concern. And then there was a meeting amongst a large number of stakeholders, small businesses, Columbia, our elected officials, and other community members around 12th Avenue, which has seen many of its small businesses die off, and the ones that are remaining are struggling. So, there are restaurants whose revenue is down 30% or more since DOT reconfigured the area and basically eliminated street parking, which, if you know 12th Avenue, it's a former industrial area. You're not doing anybody any favors by getting rid of street parking. And so, trying to stabilize that area, trying to make some fixes to that, we've been fortunate to have the support of the Borough President's Office and Councilmember Levine in that initiative. And then in that area, the 135th Street Marine Transfer Station, which was decommissioned in the late 90s and has been sitting underutilized and rotting into the water for the past 20 years, we are attempting to push DCAS, sanitation, and EDC to begin an RFP process to redevelop that in accordance with the principles the board and We Act for Environmental Justice laid out through a visioning process about 10 years ago. So that's all happening in that one kind of Manhattanville area of the board. And then the other thing that continues is we are going through the process of doing a community-led rezoning in conjunction with our Councilmember Mark Levine and the Speaker Corey Johnson, who are helping us get this done without the aid of the Department of City Planning, who rejected us 3 or 4 times with our proposal. So we are really hoping to put some zoning in there that will both increase affordable housing opportunities and prevent things like a 41-story student housing tower from being built as of right. And so that work, remains so far on track for 2020.
Can I just, we recently had Scott Stringer came into the Lower East Side to do a roundtable, and the whole thing about education, Department of Education, and not putting new schools in came up because we were promised a new school as part of Essex Crossing as well. And part of the issue as to why DOE keeps saying we don't need a new school is because parents aren't willing to keep their kid on the wait list. So they put their kids in a private school, and then the DOE looks at the wait list for the schools in the district and says, well, there's not enough kids on this wait list to warrant another school, so we don't need another school. So it's this weird, vicious, cyclical thing that is just never going to correct itself unless parents don't keep their kids on, keep their kids on the wait list and don't put them in private schools. But nobody's willing to take that risk.
Well, and then in Lower Manhattan, they took off the wait list for the most part and redistributed kids around the neighborhood, so that there is no perceived necessary wait list, because it looks bad for the DOE. It's frustrating for parents if you live across the street from a school and you're not assigned to that school, but it goes along the same thing that they don't want to see wait lists. It's a way for them to justify it's actually not required. We have a seat for everyone.
And we've had issues in the past with the School Construction Authority and their criteria for, investment
Seekers.
and stuff. And I'm not an expert in that, but our education committee is. But the additional problem is that, we do have schools in that area that are massively overcrowded in facilities not designed for the age range that the schools, are accommodating. And that was, looking at the state of the existing facilities is one of the reasons why this site was promised to us. Is it was very obvious to everyone involved that they were overcrowded, too many co-locations, not enough infrastructure for the amount of students there, not the appropriate, just sizing of things like bathrooms, designed for elementary schoolers being used by high schoolers, and there was a new school created as part of that agreement, the Teachers College Community School, that outgrew its building and had to, lease another building several blocks away and split the grades by, split the student population by grade amongst 2 different buildings that they have to coordinate now. Like, this is very obvious that a new public school facility is needed, and Columbia committed to providing it in either their project area or immediately adjacent, and have not fulfilled that promise. You know, DOE involvement or not, we intend to hold them to that commitment that they, you know, make, I forget the legal term for accepting a condition, but that they made a part of the conditions of their eminent domain and rezoning.
Community Board 2 is a similar issue with NYU, and we have a school that may disappear, opportunity for a school in 2 years, and as part of reconstruction and the time frames and deadlines. That's something you guys might want to confer with our chair of our Schools and Education Committee. I think that there's some thoughts there that might be helpful as far as pursuing that. Some of those changes. We also have another school that was promised as part of rezoning, Hudson Square, that has yet to be constructed, or even any energy around, I think, in quite some time. And a lot of it is the needs, which was demonstrating the need for a school, even though there's an opportunity, and once, you know, an opportunity's gone, how do you find another opportunity if the need is there in a few years down the road?
Aren't there statistics of how many people apply and how many people are admitted, and from that you can extrapolate the people that would be on the wait list, except that they're not because they didn't want to be on the wait list, and show the need through some kind of statistics? There are so many. And also the borough president Gal had brought up that, I don't want to step on your toes, I think CB11 with the rezoning, that developers are making promises and not keeping them. So this is really a major issue. And then when they want to put in a school, they ask for more height and more density or more something in order to do what they're supposed to do. So, should I start then?
Hold on, before we move on to CB8, I just want to point out that Orlando Rodriguez is here. He's the urban planner for CB 9, 10, 11, and 12. He's going to be leaving soon, and he's diligently working on the Lennox Terrace that we rezoning that we talked about earlier. So thank you, Orlando, for all your work for our community.
It's been an absolute privilege to serve boards that I've been working with. And I'm going to miss you all. Thank you, Rose.
Okay. CB8.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if everyone would be interested in joining CB8 on a letter to the Landmarks Preservation Commission asking for more input into staff level decisions. We, as long as I can remember, had no applications this month, and we're finding staff making decisions on issues that are pretty big and significant. So it's troubling. Okay, well, I've drafted a letter, so Rosie has offered to send it around, and it's very specific to CB8, but if we put more stuff in it or take out some things, I'm happy to edit as you choose. On the census, I do want to emphasize we're doing workshops and how effective they are in getting people. There is someone on the board I've mentioned, Lorraine Brown. She has translated the notices into Russian, Chinese, Spanish, as well as English, and it's been very effective at getting dozens of people to register. We are fighting Northwell on its planned expansion at triple the zoning. It wants to rezone and then seek variances. And what the BSA said is that the most number of variances are sought by not-for-profits, which I think raises a lot of questions. Northwell's a big thing. We're still in our fight on height, so well, I don't know where Barry went, but I want to talk to him about that. And it seems that the lifting the cap on the floor area ratio is rearing its ugly head in Albany again. There's a hearing on Monday at the council. The office is at 250 Broadway on it. They're not even in session yet, so and they're framing it in terms of affordable housing. So but it doesn't, from our viewpoint, it doesn't add to affordable housing. It's just an excuse to get more density and to get more profits for the builders. We've seen no indication that more height leads to more affordable housing or anything else. But when they couch it in the affordable housing, it looks good for them. But we really don't trust that. Small businesses are an issue. We did a study where we have some fellows that are looking at the vacancies and the reasons for vacancies, and again, it's really troubling. And I just want to say, I went on Open House New York to a tour of a garment district factory and embroidery, and we talked about how effective Gail Brewer was in working with the Garment District, and we looked out the window at the new hotels and the vacant buildings, hoping to sell or convert to condos, and it's really distressing, and the stuff going on in Harlem and all over the place. It's just, I think it's really dreadful for the city, but that was something that was so important, so I wanted to just let everyone know how grateful they were too for this particular factory that had been in business for decades, for the involvement of the Borough President's Office.
CB7, and welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
As chair.
Thank you. Thanks. So we had our steering committee this week, so I asked them what I should be reporting on, and here are the top winners. If you read this morning's New York Times, you know my first item, which is that my transportation committee in May adopted a resolution and referred it to the full board, calling for an end of all free on-street parking. They then tabled that for a while and held a forum at which there was a fairly lively discussion. The Hatfields and McCoys were actually afraid to join in the conversation. So, and the result of that was that at the most recent Transportation Committee, they changed the call from eliminating free parking to studying what we should do about on-street parking and potential alternatives. But the Times seems to have elided over that nuance. So full board in December ought to be fun. Perhaps I'll sell tickets and we can help balance the budget.
Sorry.
A couple of other things to note. We had a ULURP hearing last night on one of many redevelopments on the 90th to 96th Street corridor around Broadway and West End. This one is going through ULURP because it involves the sale of city-owned property. One of the distinguishing characteristics, and the reason I'm mentioning it, because otherwise it's just sort of routine, is that many of the units, including a healthy number of the, or perhaps unhealthy number of the affordable units, are micro units. They are just a little bigger than what you probably lived in a dormitory in college if you went that route. So small, in fact, 280 to 350 square feet, that the developer is providing built-in furniture, so a bed that,
Murphy bed?
sort of a Murphy bed kind of thing, and a table that pulls out. Those who've seen Charlie Chaplin movies can predict the next part of what's going to happen there. And they are marketing them to seniors, which might be interesting if you can actually turn a walker around in the remaining floor space. So stay tuned on that. We were asked to report that our storefronts are continuing to be empty. There is a Broadway task force that's trying to look at whether street improvements and pedestrian improvements would help or hurt the effort to keep our storefronts from being occupied. We formed a legislative committee, and I'll report later on how that goes, but the idea is that we have a central group of folks, mostly lawyers, God bless us, that will be looking at legislation at the state and city and to a certain extent federal levels, and then referring that to committees for potential adoption or action, so perhaps that would be of interest. The sad news is that I believe my predecessor, Roberta, reported about the wholesale eviction of 120 women from a employment shelter at West 107th Street, which had been amazingly adopted by the surrounding community, including houses of worship and employers and the school, and how they were truly a part. I mean, they were planting peonies with folks on the street, and the Department of Homeless Services announced without any ever showing up at a meeting that they were being kicked out in favor of men. It is still an employment shelter, we understand, but they turned a deaf ear to exactly the kind of community support that you would think that they would welcome and celebrate. Unfortunately, despite concerted efforts by many of my board colleagues, as well as many other leaders, including the borough president and Councilmember Mark Levine, actually the public advocate came to one of these rallies and so forth. But sadly, great rallies don't always result in change to policy, and so we now have an empty building and the prospect of a very different population moving in. And now we're struggling to try to get our community members who are still raw from this experience not to take that out on the new incoming population. I'm not certain how well that'll go, but perhaps we take a long view on that. Finally, a happy note, with the support of Councilmember Mark Levine and Borough President Brewer, as well as the mayor and a few other sources, a fully accessible, inclusive playground has opened in place of a rather dilapidated, sad affair at 105th Street and Amsterdam, the Bloomingdale Playground. It's the first in Manhattan and possibly in the city to adopt principles called universal design, where it's not just accessible in that someone mobility challenged can get into the space, but there's this long figure-8 ramp and so forth, so that folks of varying levels of mobility can actually engage and play together, and the equipment works for everybody. There is also a basketball court and a running track, but this feature is unique, and we hope will become a template for further use, and of course it includes an upgrade of the comfort station, which continues to baffle me why that costs more than the gross national product of Brazil, but it does, and but at least we have it. So that's our report for this month. Thanks very much. Sure.
Do you know who the service center provider was for that shelter? And is it the same one?
It's Help USA. And
We've had the same issue, similar,
Mhm.
and a new shelter opening, which they've agreed to turn from men to women. So,
well, no, this isn't, don't get Mark started, but the women who are being evicted were truly being evicted in a way that rent-controlled landlords would want to emulate. And they were sent to shelters in Brooklyn that turned out not to have a bed for them, sent back, sent to a shelter in Queens, turned out not to have a bed, same day, by the way. So that finally a community member said, look, sleep on my couch. This is A, the level of support in the community, and B, the dysfunction at the Department of Homeless Services. So I'm sorry, don't get me started.
See,
The pedestrian improvements, we just heard from the 7 bids that are in our community board last night, and that was a big topic of discussion as far as encouraging businesses and having outdoor spaces, having benches, having places for people to eat lunch. And it gets people outside and spending money in the community, and something that was discussed at some length.
Love to follow up on that. Thank you.
Welcome, Mark. Molly Hollister, Community Board 6. We have the 30th Street Shelter. It's the largest men's shelter in New York City, the intake facility. So we've had some issues around that shelter, but they're very, it's overcrowded. So we should all be talking about how we can deal with this population versus just shuffling them around. And our community board, I think all of you here will agree that we want to help these people. We don't want to just get them out of our neighborhoods. So ours is, I think it's probably, numbers are always varying, but it's supposed to be an 800-person shelter, and there's probably about 1,600 people right now with people anyway, so there are a lot of problems, but we should figure out how to build more supportive housing, more, affordable housing. I know we're all on it, but our board is really focused on that. So moving into something that we're all talking about, zoning, Mount Sinai Beth Israel is moving out of our area, and there are 15 buildings, really 2 main buildings that are larger structures that we're working with Gail Brewer's office and all the electeds. We're trying to figure out how we can build a coalition to not just have those buildings go to developers and have them, they need to make money on their buildings that they're selling. They're moving to, I guess, to CB 3. Is it all in 3? All this Mount Sinai?
medical facilities.
All of it's in 3. Okay, so.
We have our own issues with that.
Yes, right. So, but we're trying to really build a strong coalition and again, ask for not only affordable housing there, but supportive housing and some mental health facilities, senior facilities, that type of thing. I'll just be really quick. The ESCR, DDC, and the city mayor's office continue to come to us for the resiliency project. They'll come to our land use committee regularly. We have